Good day. Welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. Your host here, Rylan Qualley, once again, and we're going to dive into online training with Johnnie Perry, another one of my online training colleagues. I met him through Vincent Del Monte. He was actually one of the first people I roomed with at a live event. And I got to tell you, Johnny is jacked, and he's a jacked family man. And I was honestly quite impressed because you look at him training, and it's nothing crazy. We went to the gym, and it's like those are basic total body workouts, and he stays in great shape all year round. And so I thought maybe this guy's always been in shape, but no, that's not the case. He came from actually doing more of the corporate lifestyle, being overweight, really challenged with his health, and he had to transition. So we dive into a great story that he has, how he was able to do that, and it inspired him to become a trainer and to help so many others. So we talk about from there what he likes about the online training. We talk about the pros and cons of it. We even dive into what are the challenges within social media, which you will find very interesting and helpful for you to help navigate what is a crazy world now within social media and the information that's out there. So I want Johnny to tell his story to you. Without further ado, here is Johnnie Perry. Good day, Johnny. I'm so pumped to have you on here, man. How are you today?
Fantastic, and I appreciate you enjoying. I'm tongue-tied this morning. I appreciate you inviting me on, Rylan.
Yeah, no problem. You know, it's Monday, so we got to get through it. But no, it's going to be fun. So me and Johnny met in an online mentorship with Vincent Del Monte, and we've stayed in touch ever since. He was even just a good influence on me with some of the great advice. So I don't have too much of a precursor as far as the introduction and telling people who you are. So let's dive into your story. Why don't you tell the audience who you are and what got you into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so my journey begins with the fact that I was a skinny kid growing up. I am 5'9", pushing 5'10". I would love to say 5'10" on my driver's license, but I can't. And I was 150 pounds soaking wet when I graduated from high school and went to college. And I went to college at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, go Vols. And in college, I got into weightlifting. I was tired of the way I was looking. I was like, man, I'm around all these other guys on the football team, basketball team. They're muscular. And I suffer from low confidence basically my entire childhood. And I needed something to propel me to where I had that level of confidence to whether it was talk to girls or just be more social. So I started lifting. And I went from 150 pounds to 175 when I graduated from college. And yes, a lot of that was muscle, but it was a little fat as well. And then I graduated from college and got into the corporate world, started working for a mortgage company. And I'm sure you can picture this. You go from being active, walking all the time around campus, lifting weights 5 times a week, to sitting in a cubicle and only working out maybe 3 times a week, not moving much, eating everything in sight. And quickly, I got close to 200 pounds. And so I went from having a flat stomach to having a corporate belly. And after a few years, I got tired of it. I got tired of the way I was looking in the mirror. I was tired of being fatigued and tired all the time and suffering from aches and pains because I used to play pickup basketball with a bunch of guys from work. And I would have a slip or a fall there, turn an ankle, and it was because there was too much weight on me. And I got to the point where I was tired of it, and I completely changed my body. I went from close to 200 pounds, about 196 pounds, to all the way to 165. And in that process, I discovered that I wanted to help people, guys like me, people like me, do the same thing. Get to a point to where you're tired of the way that you look, you're tired of the low energy, you want to shed fat, build muscle, improve all the other areas of your life, and just completely transform your body. And I became a coach. And in 2015, I got my trainer certification, and I was training people before and after work. So I was working at a mortgage company as a compliance auditor, one of the most boring jobs you could ever imagine. And so before work, I would train probably about 2 people before work. And then after work, I would train 2 or 3 more people. And that was usually Monday through Thursday, sometimes Friday. And then I got to the point to where my wife and I decided it was time for us to move. We wanted to move from Knoxville to Atlanta. I found a job at a gym right outside of Atlanta. My wife's job at the time told her it was okay to go ahead and move and transfer to the office that they had here. And we've been here ever since. And that was close to 8 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. I just love that journey, especially like you say, you came from the corporate world, and that's so valuable. One of the major kind of biases I think I have is if someone is a fit coach and they've always been a fit coach, I'm not saying their information is wrong. I'm not saying that they can't actually help people, but I don't think they're going to have the soft skills of the transition, of the challenge of, I felt terrible and I had to pick myself up. And I think that's so important. Like when you came from, as you mentioned, being on a campus, people underestimate walking from class to class is a high level of activity, not just the training, it's just the walking, and then having more flexibility in your schedule. And then you're confined to a desk, what I always call metabolic prisons, when you just have to sit at a desk and then you're high stressed. You're actually high stress all day. And so at the end of the day, you're tired, and you're tired because of the food you eat and because you're not training enough. So it's a metabolic prison because you're not even going out and doing things. So I would love to know, when you're having that transition, what were some of the big challenges and obstacles you had to overcome that really made a big difference to get that, the 200 pounds off? What were some big ones for you?
The biggest thing was having that why factor. And I'm sure you deal with this with a lot of clients, because if you don't have a why that's big enough, what's that thing that's going to get you out of bed in the morning when like you don't want to get out of bed and go to the gym or go for a walk, when you'd rather just sleep in? What's that big reason for wanting to eat that lunch that you meal prepped instead of going down the street and going to get McDonald's or Burger King? So having that why factor was the biggest thing. And for me, it was just the years of being fed up and not having the confidence that I talked about. But one of the things that I left out was, when I was a kid, I suffered from an autoimmune disorder called alopecia, which I was 12 years old and I had bald spots in my head. So that was the turn in my confidence. Up until then, I was totally fine. But after that, I didn't have that confidence to like voice my opinion, talk to girls, be as social as I wanted to be. And I just got fed up. So that was my why. It's just like, I want to get to a point to where like I'm in shape to the point to where I can take my shirt off and not feel bad about myself, feel great about myself. And so that was the biggest factor. Another thing that I had to get over was simply having a plan. I had lifted weights for years, but my plan was always going to bodybuilding.com or picking up a bodybuilding magazine and just picking out a routine from there, which we don't know until we're older, but a lot of the guys in those magazines, like, they're taking steroids so they can work out 6 or 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Right. And so like finding the right plan, getting in those daily walks that you mentioned, because I wasn't walking at all. So scheduling that time to where I could get up from my cubicle, go take a 10 to 15 minute walk. The office that I used to work at had a great greenway that I wasn't taking advantage of. So planning those scheduled time for walks, scheduling those workouts, whether it be in the middle of the day or after work or before work, just getting to the point to where that was built into my schedule. I would say those are the biggest hurdles. And then along with the nutrition, I always knew that I didn't eat right, but just getting to the point to where I was making better choices at least 80% of the time, that was huge for me. That was absolutely huge for me. And I'm from the South. I'm from Tennessee, live in Georgia now. And my mom used to make the most savory things growing up. So that was, we're talking about apple pies, mac and cheese, collard greens, fried chicken. I grew up on that stuff. So trying to break that habit, that's the way I always grew up. That's the stuff I grew up eating. And then in my late 20s, early 30s, going to, hey, I'm going to have chicken and rice and broccoli today. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have steak and eggs for breakfast. I'm going to have the protein shake and the oatmeal versus, having a biscuit and cheesy eggs and grits for breakfast. That was a huge hurdle too.
Those are all, very big hurdles. I love the starting point, though, that can't be understated. And I think a lot of people have a hard time discovering the why. The why is like the answer to it's your fire. And, I had another coach on here recently, and I love the analogy. He says stoking the fire. And on top of that, a fire can burn out. Like, people might think they have a fire, but it's like, no, when you have a fire, because it gets your ass out of bed in the morning to do those things, make the actions. And it's the actions that on a weak moment, it's still powerful enough. I had another really good analogy given to me by someone on the podcast, and it was like, when you love someone, you don't hesitate to do things you don't want to do for like a partner. Your wife needs to go get you to pick her up at 4 a.m. because she's getting in on a flight. You don't hesitate. She asks you to go grocery shopping. You don't hesitate. You love that person. So there's like a level of self-love and discipline that you need for yourself, but you need to care about that so much. And as you mentioned, that fed up moment is so powerful. It's like you have to get fed up with where you're at and almost like angry at it and almost like use that pain, because pain is the biggest motivator to move your hand off a hot stove. And I love how your actions are all pretty simple, but it's so important that people start with like, hey, I have a fire under my ass. I need to walk more. I need to have a plan, as you mentioned. And it's too bad that so many people look at, well, who do I ask? Well, they think about these bodybuilders that are doing the far end extreme. If you want to learn how to play hockey, you don't necessarily need to stare at the NHLers to know how to skate. You don't know how to skate. You start with the fundamentals, right? And then you work your way into it, just like all these other things. And to let go of old food habits is so hard. But I love how you actually amplified that 80%. It's 80%. And this is what people have a hard time with. It's like, it's not forever. It's not every single meal. It's just most of the time. So when you go to think of your transitions, first off, how long did you feel like it really took you to change and to find this way of life work for you? How long did that take?
I would say it took 12 months. And mind you, I was doing this at the same time that I was going to night school and getting my master's.
Wow.
So so doing both and going to work every day, Monday through Friday, required a high level of discipline, because I wasn't happy with my body. I wasn't happy with my job. I just wasn't happy with life in general. So I took the step of, well, what can I do to improve me? And for me, it started with my body. And then it started with acquiring other skills to help me in my career and other parts of life. And it just kind of all meshed at the same point. I mean, there came a tipping point where it's just like, no, like I have to do everything I can do possibly to fix where I'm at in life right now.
Yeah, I totally get that. The 1 year is actually a pretty solid transition of lifestyle. Like and people need to understand that that's not that long to change your life, but people need to understand it's longer than you think it is, because so many people want the 90-day challenge and so many people want to do a 1 month challenge. It's like, no, make sure you think you know how long is. It's longer than you think it is. And it's actually forever, right? So it's at least have a perspective that life's going to change very slowly and gradually over the course of a year, and you become a different person the year after. And you're always a different person, but how different you are is depending on the choices you make every day. Now, from there, you transitioned into being a personal trainer. And so how much of it was kind of online versus in person? Did you start in person and then slowly grow to online? How was that transition?
Yeah, so I was solely online from 2015. Excuse me, not online. I was solely in person from 2015 until 2019. And the way that happened was, as I mentioned, training before and after work in Knoxville. We moved to Atlanta. I started working at a Gold's Gym right outside of Atlanta. And I was driving to the gym. It was about in the morning, probably about 35 minutes, but in the evenings, it ended up being about a 45-minute drive. So I'm going out of my way to get the experience to train about 15 people a day, right? And I ended up meeting a guy who had a studio in Atlanta, much closer like to where I lived. And I started training at his gym probably about 3 months after I met him. And so that was a huge relief, because I'm at a private studio. I'm not having to like go on the gym floor and try to like get clients, like talk to strangers and, try and sell them like in a weird way. So I'm at a studio, I'm doing classes, and then we find out that we're pregnant. And so I said, okay, I'm spending probably 12 hours a day. I'm getting up about 4:30. I'm training anywhere from about 5:30 to 11 a.m., 2 hour break. Then I'm probably training about 2 to 8. And I was just like, I can't do this and have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to hire my first business coach so I could have the foundation to go online. And that was March 2019.
Wow. Okay. Was that VDM? Was that through Vince Del Monte?
No, that was through Eric Bach. Eric Bach used to have a coaching program with a former business partner. And so Eric and his business partner, they showed me the fundamentals of creating content, building an email list. They introduced me to paid ads and introduced me to the world of copywriting. So I was doing that, slowly getting online clients, still training in person. And then in August of 2019, 2 months before my son was born, I had a falling out with the owner of the training studio, and he decided to let me go. Mind you, I was actually going to put in my 2 weeks notice, probably a week later. So
Great.
timing was okay, but it would have been nice to tell my clients, like, hey, I'm leaving. I'm doing like, not in a, I'm not going to steal clients, but it would have been nice to have like nice farewell. Like, it's been awesome being with you, instead of him saying that I can't train there anymore and sending an email to like all the clients saying like Johnny's no longer with us.
Was that because
and not giving a reason why?
And did he tell you it was because you were doing online training,
We
or
had disagreements
did he have a purpose for you? Why?
Like, we had disagreements on the way that the client should be trained, like the approach. And it's his studio. He can do whatever he wants to. He's well within his right. I think we just had a different approach in like how we wanted to coach the clients, how they should be treated, how we should be helping them. And I'm sure my clients will say this, but I wanted to do more to help them.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to get this in businesses, right? You're going to get this in terms of just the way that, like you say, it's his space. There's not much you can do. Okay, so we had a little technical difficulty there, but I'm going to hop right back into what we were talking about there. So what I'm really curious too, as you're going into online, so there's a big transition, and I, did very similar right around the same time. COVID made us all do that little pivot. How did you like that transition of going from in-person to online? And I'd love to know your kind of feedback on like the pros and cons of online versus in-person training.
I loved the process because I wanted to make that transition for so long. I knew exactly how I wanted to do it. I knew that I wanted to have that mixture because, I didn't start coaching people or training people in person until 2015. So like, I'm still less than 10 years in this industry. So I felt like I still needed that experience of seeing people in person so I could know, hey, like, what are the common exercises that most people that I want to train need to be doing most of the time? What are the questions that they're going to have? What are the issues, the concerns that they're going to have? Because if I know as much of that as possible, and if I know their language and how to speak to them, then that transition online, like speaking to people that I don't know, having that conversation with them is going to be much easier. So I feel like the transition was very easy because initially I did have that hybrid model. Now I don't. So that made the transition much easier. But I would say the difference between the two, obviously in person, you're going to have more of that one-on-one conversation and get to know somebody. But I mean, you can still do that online. I think the misconception that people have when they're trying to decide if they want to have an in-person coach versus an online coach is, and I'm sure you've heard this, well, I need somebody to watch my form. And it's just like, no, you don't. You actually don't. You really don't. I think that's just the resistance in terms of like, well, I don't want to take that extra step just to watch a video and go through the practice time on my own of doing it the right way. But I also think that's more of a roadblock mentally of, well, I'm not going to do it unless I have somebody to meet at a certain time. And it's just like, no, you can get your ass up and go to the gym. Like, You don't need somebody to babysit you and hold your hand to get to the gym and work out for 45 minutes. I think that is something that most people in the world need to get over.
I very much agree on that second point, especially. It's not going to be a long-term strategy for you to have a babysitter. It's really not. Now, I totally appreciate someone's introduction into a gym that they're just not comfortable. Like I have an online client that doesn't even want to go in the gym because she's just not confident in the gym, but she does work out at home. Now, what I've just really kind of narrowed down as far as like the whole form thing is 90% of what you do is fine. And what's even really cool about the body that people really need to understand is you're going to get better at it. Unless you're really being ignorant on certain fundamental things. Like if you're trying to get better at it, you watch the recording. If you make a good video, you show them how to do it. And I always tell them, watch a recording before you go to do it, pretty repetitively when you're new to a movement. And then if you record yourself, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to improve your form. Like, you send me a video at any point in time. And every time I did this with my online coach, I would start to nail it down. And I started to realize, oh, I'm actually doing that thing that she said I was doing. Oh, I'm still doing it. Oh, wait, this is better. I didn't even need to send the video. I was just taking the videos and I was actually coaching myself on it. And it's very obvious to what you're doing. Then there's no doubt when someone's in person, that could be like anywhere from 10 to 20% that you can make slight adjustments. But the thing is because the body wants to get better at movements. And if you try to intend on getting better at movements, you're going to get better at them. And it's just the effort of, okay, get like, as much as people hate it, like record yourself during a workout. I tell all my clients, buy a little stand. And I know it might be a little awkward. It's way more commonplace in the gym now that people are recording themselves. It's not a big deal. You're not doing it for social media like I am. And so you just record yourself and you can take that extra step. And that is the long-term approach, as you mentioned, to babysit. And I think the really challenging thing for people is the discomfort of like, am I doing it right? So you're probably not. Like, I don't even do my powerlifting perfectly, but that's a part of the journey. It's a part of actually putting in these reps and making it better. But the best part about online is that we could be there for any single rep throughout the entire week. It's just not within the instantaneous moment, but you just send the video after. And so I think that's something can become more commonplace. And I had another coach on here and he nailed it. It's like, if people have the discipline of showing up, they actually don't worry about the other stuff as much. They don't worry about, they'll send you a video for form. They'll send you to get that reassurance. I think you're right. There's way more to do with, they need that babysitter. They need someone right there along the way. Now, I think the online has the secondary piece that's more important. And you and I both know training is just one part of the equation, right? You need the babysitting for the nutrition, right? And that's where online training coaches are significantly better than in-person coaches, because they're not giving a lot of their time for that. So I would love to know from your experience with the online coaching, what are some of the biggest challenges you have to help your clients overcome to get success within their nutrition?
The number one is, you got to know how much you're eating, man. And I know people don't want to download my Fitness Pal or whatever fitness, food tracker. But it's like, if you have zero idea how much you're eating, how on earth do you think you're going to be able to lose weight and keep it off? Like, can you not use a fitness tracker and lose weight? You absolutely can. But if you don't know how much is going into your body enough to the point to where you're not killing your metabolism, and you get to a point to where you're like one of these Biggest Loser contestants and you're just like killing your body on a low amount of calories, you lose a bunch of weight and you gain it all back and then some in 2 or 3 years, like you're not going to be able to sustain that. So for me, the biggest thing is helping them get to a point to where they know how much they should be eating to get down to a certain weight. Once they reach that weight, how much they should be eating to maintain it. And if they decide, hey, I want to actually build some muscle and gain some size, how much they should be eating at that point, knowing how much protein they should be eating. That's huge, because you and I both know we can talk to somebody, we can have that first call with somebody, and they go through what they're eating, and they can tell you for breakfast, oh, I'm having a bagel and a granola bar, and for lunch, I may pick up something on my lunch break, like a salad, or I could just have like a burger. And then like at dinner, it's whatever my wife or my husband makes. And you and I both know that they're not eating nearly the amount of protein they should be eating. So how much are you eating? How much protein are you eating during the day? Water intake is a huge thing. How many stimulants you're taking? Like how much coffee are you drinking? Are you smoking? Are you drinking alcohol? Those are the biggest factors. And those aren't huge things to fix. You and I both know those aren't huge things to fix. They can be fixed very quickly. It's just having them stick to it. But having the knowledge of how much you're eating, that has a huge impact, because it's a huge eye opener on people when they think they're eating 1,500 calories or 2,000 calories, and then they actually start tracking it for a week, and they're like, holy shit, I'm eating 2,500 calories a day. I had no idea. This is why I can't lose weight.
Totally appreciate that. And people have a hard time knowing that that's the truth, because they'll say it's my metabolism. It's like, well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll say, well, it's my age, it's my hormones. It's like, okay, well, just so you know, bodybuilders have terrible hormones. They still lose weight. And so you start to dive into all these questions of what they think metabolism is. And I'll straight up I'll give them a whole lesson on this is what breaks down your metabolism. It's your body weight and size, it's thermal effective food, it's your non-exercise and your exercise. And all of these things you control. So if we control all these things, now what are we going to say about your metabolism? So now it's about your calories. And it is the overarching thing that people try to refute. And you always have to be like, I'm sorry. And I always say protein and calories, right? If you have the right protein, right calories, you fill in the rest with whatever you're really feeling like you can and it can sustain. I really appreciate that. It is simply like how much, and people don't like that. I'm curious your evolution for your clients. Do you start with getting them, because it was actually through VDM that I started to appreciate the value of meal plans for some people, and then some people can't handle meal plans. And so some people want meal plans, some people don't, depending on that evolution. I eventually want almost every client to track their protein and calories. Do you get them to go right into tracking? Do you give them some meal structures? What's your evolution for a typical client?
I do both.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do both is because, as you mentioned, if you can get the calories right, you can get the protein right. And it doesn't have to be 100%. If you're like 90% of the way there in terms of the numbers, you're going to do way better than 99% of people that aren't doing this at all. So I get them to track their calories and their protein, because you do need to have an eye on it so you can know exactly what you're doing, right? And the mix of the carbs and the protein, I give them a percentage, but I'm like, I don't care what it is. Just get those two things right, or be close with the calories and the protein. But I also provide example meal plans, and I tell them up front, I'm like, you can follow this verbatim, and you're going to be right where I want you to be, right? With very simple foods, very simple structure. And I give them, I have a video training and a spreadsheet that shows them how they can sub in different proteins and different veggies and starches and fruits with the meal plan that I have. So it works really well. But I give them both because I want them to be prepared for life after me. Like, do I want to work with them for a long time? I absolutely do. I want to be able to help them, get them set up on the right plan, help them achieve results. And then if they want to stick with me, along the journey, because we know 90 days or 6 months isn't enough for a lot of people, I'm more than welcome to have them. And I have a lot of clients that I've had for 2 or 3 years, but I want them to be set up for success after we're done, to the point to where they can get this fat off and sustain that for the rest of their life. They've developed a style of eating that isn't going to deter them from not knowing what to eat when they're dining out, or how to eat when they're on vacation, or how active they should be on vacation or on a business trip. So I like to give them all the tools possible.
Super important. You have the autonomy of choice. Like, that's the goal in the long run, because it's still your diet. And I love that I do a similar style. It's like, I give you the structure, and then I need you to be able to understand how to do it and handle it for yourself, because eventually there's a good chance I might not be there. And it's just even not there in that instant. Like you say, on vacation, on a work trip, whatever it is, someone wants to offer you dinner one night, and you have to be able to understand how to make these calories work for you within an instant. And having that ability is so freeing for a client. And it's really interesting how every client's a little different. Some people will follow the meal plan to a T. Another person will say, yeah, I just don't think this fits me, but I could, follow my protein and calories. And I had this one client where I wanted her to actually try just, no treat foods or anything for just a couple of weeks. I like to at least get them on, consistency. She's done meal planning very consistent before in the past. So I wasn't really like, she had to experience it. And she said, I need to include a treat every day. And she's had like binge eating issues in the past. And I was like, if you feel it's the right choice for you, I tried it and she's on terrific success. She was one of the only clients I think I've had that lost weight over the holidays, like over Christmas. I'm like, holy fuck, I haven't even tried to do that. That's incredible. So it's really interesting how you have to be able to give them that education and knowledge, because every client's going to be different, right, in their lifestyle, but every client wants that autonomy in the end. I find it so interesting how it's such a resistance point. When you have a client that has a hard time with, tracking, it's hard. Like, how do you get them to overcome that hurdle? Because I tend to find some people are fine with it. Some people just make it sound like it's a mountain out of a molehill, right?
They do. And that's the point where it just has to be like, all right, if you don't want to track, then you are going to have to use this meal plan and learn how to substitute these foods in, because you can use the meal plan, which in our plans, I include obviously like portion size, how many calories a certain thing, a certain item is, how many grams of protein it has. If you use that plan, you can get to a certain point to where you're like, hey, I don't need to look at my fitness pal to know that 4 ounces of chicken is 168 calories. Like, I know that. Or like, I know that a quarter cup of jasmine rice is like 170. Like, you get to a point where if you start eating the same things repeatedly, you just kind of instinctively know. And then there's the, tracking progress, right? Like, the scale isn't everything, but I know if I step on the scale and I'm a pound heavier the next morning, and I can look back and I'm like, all right, well, what did I eat the day before? I know, like, man, you know what? Like, I probably ate a little bit more at dinner the night before, probably had a little extra salt. That might be the issue. And if I know I can counteract that by drinking a little bit more water the next day, my weight's probably going to go back down. So kind of like knowing that, and then like knowing how your clothes are fitting, like, oh man, this belt is a little snug today. Like, what have I been eating the past few days, right? Just having those, and I forgot the terms. The term I used to use quite a bit, but just knowing like, all right, how are my clothes fitting? I can check the scale. Like, how am I feeling? Like, kind of knowing those instances of your progress, that has a huge effect on like how much you're eating too. And then sleep as well. If I can get up the next morning and I'm like, man, I'm so tired, I'm groggy, I can go back to like what I had to eat the day before. And I'm like, man, like, I probably didn't eat enough protein, or like probably ate way too many carbs. Let me bring that down the following day and see if that has a big effect. And I know for me personally, it does. I was the kind of person, if I had a ton of carbs at breakfast, my day was shot. Like, it absolutely was shot. Right now, I can have oatmeal in the morning and I'm totally fine, because I did all those things for years to where like my metabolism is sky high. I'm taking a lot of steps during the day, and having that bowl of oatmeal in the morning like doesn't have an effect whatsoever. So I think it's just getting to the point to realizing like what works and what doesn't work, because I don't track my food now, but I did for quite a bit. And that allowed me to figure out what works for me and how food affects me in certain instances. And I think everybody should go through that.
I really agree with that. And that's an evolution I'm planning on taking in the future. My big challenge is that I don't intuitively eat well. And I think when people get in this idea of, mindful eating, or they might say like, I'm trying to eat intuitively, just be aware that if you're overweight, your intuition's shit. Like, you're really like, your intuition is telling you to have a candy bar. It's telling you to have an extra bite. Like, when you are in the midst of high processed food, don't rely on your intuition. You need to rely on your will a lot more. And then all those symptoms that you described after, it's like, oh, why am I bloated? It's like, well, your intuition had you eat a little bit too much there. And so for myself, I still have to master, I want to say, that intuition a little bit more before I feel like when I know the calories are kind of in line, in the right range, that's when I still behave well. And I hope to get to more intuitive eating in the future, but it's super important that people even practice it. And I do try to practice it. And it's a practice. It's like, you know what you should eat, start to eyeball it after, I basically say weigh and track for a day, and then try to not weigh, but visually remember everything that was whole food based, like the next day, and just stick to your meal plan just from eyeballing it. And then pay attention to how you feel. And it's very doable. It's just, it takes a lot of accountability. And I always call that like a recall process. It's like, remember what it looks like. And you might find that you do pretty well for a while. And then after a week or two, maybe even a month or two, you're going to want to do a calorie check-in just to make sure that you're still in line with where that is. Because a high stress time, you might be having a little bit more rice, a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. And certainly a little bit more of that. More dense foods come pretty natural to us. But I think that's really good that you have that kind of evolution, that backup for them, but to make them more intuitive. I'd be curious, because as an online coach, we're both on social media. I think this is a really fun topic to dive into quick. What is pissing you off the most on social media right now in the fitness industry? Because there is so much shit out there. So I'd love to know, what's one of your biggest pet peeves right now?
I think for a while, because I'm sure you've noticed this with the algorithm, you don't really see anybody's stuff anymore. So,
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that's pissing me off. Actually, let me go back. What used to piss me off the most was everybody hopping on a trend and just like, no matter what your values were, whatever the trend was, you just hopped on it and made a video about it. So let's say if somebody was into intuitive eating and being a vegan became the trend, they would just make a video about the vegan diet. So just hopping on the trends was the thing that used to piss me off the most. And I think those people, when you're hopping on trends like that, like you're not doing yourself justice in terms of like building a loyal following, because you're hopping from thing to thing. So I would say that used to piss me off the most. I think now the thing that pisses me off is I would say it's probably the fact that you can't give a ton of value in what is the most popular thing right now, right? Like the most popular thing is going to be like really short reels. And like, as a coach, you want to give as much value as possible. And it's really hard to do that in like 20 to 30 seconds, the value that you want to. But that just goes with people's attention spans, man. And I get that. And you have to find ways around that. But I would say it's the biggest thing, because we got into coaching because we want to help people. It's really hard to give a lot of value in 20 to 30 seconds. And if you can do that effectively, like, you're awesome, and hats off to you. But yeah, I would say that's the thing for me. I mean, what is it? What's your opinion on it?
Well, I love that point. I didn't even think of it like, actually there's a problem with the system, not just the information out there. I think I just wouldn't have conceived that, but that's beautiful. I definitely am pissed off on that. When you talked about like the trending things, I used to do like the voiceover video reels all the time. And I was doing them because it would get me views. But it was pissing me off because I'm like, how is this my gift to the world? Like, how is this where I'm serving my people? It's like I'm just like acting shit out, and I'm looking at all these things. Like, and I actually fell off that trend a little bit before it was even done, because it was annoying me that this is what I was doing. But now I would say what's annoying me the most is fear mongering. Going to the grocery store, this is poison, this is poison, this is poison, whatever end of the spectrum you're on, whether it's like vegetables can kill you, everything that's an ingredient, it can kill you. And people are so afraid of food. And this dichotomous thinking is so not helpful for people. And, you're going to be a very boring coach in terms of your information if you're not doing that. And so what's annoying is if you're not at the end extremes, you're not extremely jacked and fit. Those are the two things that I see the most. Extremely jacked and fit people saying whatever they want on a trend, usually, are going to get views a ton. And then dichotomous thinking is like, seed oils are toxic, vegetables are toxic, all these ingredients, I can't believe this is fucking ridiculous you're eating this. This is the worst thing you could eat. And it's like, this dichotomous thinking is making people feel powerless in order to go after what they want, because You can't achieve that fitness physique very easily at all. A lot of these people have genetics that get them there. And then dichotomous thinking is going to make people feel powerless on what they're actually able to do, because so many people just need simple answers. And so if you are the one coming on social media and you're saying, well, you don't need to be so extreme, you're kind of a boring voice. People are going to swipe. They're not interested. So you have to remain entertaining. And that's something that is annoying, but that's the industry we're in, unfortunately.
And would you say it's fair, like with what you said, and I agree, would you say it's fair and probably a smart move for coaches to call that out and base their content around that in some form or fashion?
You know what? I as far as a smart move and what works on social media is like always a guess and check for me. Like I can't say anything with certainty other than you do have to pay attention to short attention spans. And if you can call that out and you can work around these short attention spans, absolutely, it's going to get good attention. I think the thing I've learned the most in my current mentorship with like Jordan Sett and Mike Vicante is you still also want to provide long form content. Like that's why I do my podcast. That's why I, try to give more, whether you write your own article, do a newsletter, but have the people who really want to learn from you to have somewhere else to find your information so that you're not so confined to the 60 seconds and that there's more to you than just that immediate thing. And the more that you can give, even though it's a long-term game, right? So if you make one piece of content, it's not going to get you views right away, but over the course of a year or so, people might find it. They start to do research on you. You find some good search engine optimization stuff. That's where I think coaches, it makes sense that's a long-term staying growth rather than the fast fat loss. This is a long-term fat loss, right? To really invest time into things that are going to help people more down the road. But I think that's the strategy. How about for yourself?
Yeah, I had my own podcast, and I decided I told myself I was like, I'm going to do this for a year because I wanted to get better at speaking. I wanted to have another platform to provide my clients, listeners, potential people to work with a way to just learn more about me and my program and my clients and how we're helping them, and obviously provide more value. I did it for a year, and I decided, well, let me stop, reassess, and figure out, am I going to continue to do this podcast or have another version of it, or am I going to step into the world of YouTube? So that's where I'm at with it. I also have a newsletter now, so getting better at writing is something I'm passionate about as well. But I do think the reels, the TikToks, it's all fast food, and yeah, it's a great way to introduce somebody to you, but to build a long-lasting relationship with a client who values you as a person and values you as a coach, a long form is definitely the way. Because instead of taking 20 or 30 seconds to pick out 3 tips to do X, Y, Z, they're investing, 20, 30 minutes, 60 minutes sometimes into a podcast or a video where they are learning more about you and they are learning about your values. And I think that's the more important thing.
Totally. I hope people really take that message from listening to this podcast is if you have coaches that you like, go search more of their long form content and trust that long form content, because that's when they need to have that know, like, and trust factor. And you should find out someone's story. As I mentioned, your story I love, because if someone's going to relate to, hey, I used to be an athlete, I gained weight in the office, and he went through this struggle. Like you should know that about your coach that you're going to buy from. If you don't know their backstory, or if you find out their backstory isn't similar to yours, like, be cautious, because just because they're fit doesn't mean they're going to be able to help you with that hard challenge that is relative to your situation. But I love this. I think this is a really fun conversation. I'll have to have you on here another time. Maybe we'll do an Instagram live or something like that sometime soon. I think we can really dive more into this new fitness industry with the online space. I think it's really incredible. Well, how about you tell the viewers where they can find more about you?
Yeah, on Instagram, my username is @JPYourPT. That's the primary platform I'm on. I'm also on TikTok @JPYourPT. And yeah, if you want to know more about me, just send me a DM. I love to talk to anybody. And who I primarily help are guys like me. I've worked in corporate America for over 10 years, and my mission is to help guys over 35 shed fat, build muscle so they can improve all the areas of their lives. So if that is you, please give me a follow.
Love it. And Johnny, what are you most excited for? What's your most recent ambition? I'd love to leave it off on that note.
Yeah, no, totally. So just finished my website. It's vltransform.com. And the purpose around building the website was having a central place where people can learn more about me, more about my clients, eventually put a blog on there because, as I mentioned, I wanted to become a better writer, and just have that as the one-stop shop, a hub where you could just learn more about me, whether it's short form or long form, as we mentioned.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important to have a website. It was funny working with VDM, and he was like, oh, my Instagram's my website. It's like, I feel like that's a little ignorant to not appreciate what a website still does for you. So I love that. I'll be sending people there. I'll put that in the show notes. So thank you again so much, Johnny. It was awesome to have you on here today.
Awesome being on here, Riley, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Johnnie Perry. I really loved hearing his story. That was really cool because I didn't know his past history before this chat. And it was really cool to hear how he had to evolve himself. I will always say I appreciate someone's evolution of difficulty. And it's my own bias because I have my own, that I believe you should trust that coach more in terms of helping you solve your problem. It just makes sense that they would have the same soft skills to know what it's like to overcome these battles. And knowing that Johnny came from a history of being very overweight, being in the corporate world, and then he had to just transition these habits. And I really want to highlight it for people that he talks about being very active. And the simplest thing of walking from class to class, people massively underestimate how much walking is within just walking around a campus, and how walking itself is probably one of your biggest metabolic impacts that you can have. If you want to even use that term, it's just daily activity. And the daily activity can actually add up that much more if you spread out these walks. As he mentioned, he just scheduled it in his program, routinely have walks so that he didn't argue with himself. Am I going for a walk? Am I not? He would just schedule it. And I guarantee you, if you schedule walks in at least once a day, but I personally say have an active break 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. And it could be parking farther from work. And then during your lunch hour, after you eat, go for a walk around the building or any way that you can. And then in the evening, take an evening walk to relax. And these things will make such an impact because you'll easily hit 10K steps that way. And you'll just feel more active. You'll feel like you have to take these breaks, and you won't feel like you're in that metabolic prison. That is your metabolism. You are your metabolism. And the number one thing that I think people are underestimating is walking. And it was cool to hear how he transitioned over the course of a year. It's super important that you appreciate that it's over the course of a longer period than you think it is, but it's also tangible. That's so tangible that a year from now, if you were to start changing your habits and really to lean into it. So you mentioned get a coach, get help, make sure there's systems. You could really be an entirely different person. And then from there, it's a long-term game. But it takes a year to feel like the different person. So one thing to practice the lifestyle for 90 days or a month, but to be the different person, that takes at least a year to feel like it is who you are. And I'll come back to one of the most important principles is the why. It's like, why are you doing what you're doing? Because you're going to have days you don't want to do it. As mentioned, you're going to have to get up or go fit in training if that's what it fits your schedule. You're going to have to make the decision of eating this meal plan food rather than going out when all your lunch colleagues are going for lunch and oh, you know what? I'm going to stay here. I'm going to eat this because this hits my values, because my value is my long-term health. My value is think of why. What's the why? As he mentioned, he was sick of feeling the way he feels. And I guarantee you felt that before. Lean into your pain, like appreciate, like the pain is a good motivator. I always try to tell people to think about the motivating people in their life, because that can take you outside of your essentially selfish instincts. We all have selfish instincts. We'd rather just sleep in, or rather watch a TV show a little later, or eat the candy bar, whatever it is that you shouldn't. But if you're doing something or not doing something for the sake of someone else, it's a bit different. When you have that intrinsic motivation that has to deal with someone you care about, it's very potent. And I hope that you really took some of the messaging around the online training very helpful, because if you feel like you're a person that has good discipline, online training, I do think is the best format for trainers to help you. All of my clients that have good discipline, that are coachable, that will just take the steps and the procedures, get great results because they can show up for themselves. They just need to be on the right path. And so if you're someone who doesn't have the great discipline, I'll honestly say maybe you need to start with an in-person trainer just to start. But the finesse, the long-term game will be more in line with the online training because you have to get practice of showing up for yourself. And the last thing I hope you really take home with you is navigating that social media world. It is a very, very difficult place. So don't try to pay attention to the flashy stuff, which is always going to be there. If people are talking very dichotomously, very high-end extremes of this is bad, this is good, I always say if they talk in absolutes, you absolutely don't need to listen to them because they're probably wrong about something. One of my high school teachers said one of the best pieces of advice on this: always remember to say never and always, because it only takes one time for it to be wrong. So when people speak in absolutes, this is why we absolutely don't listen to them. And you can trust voices that are more in between, more relative to you. And wouldn't you rather it not be dichotomous? Wouldn't you rather it not be so black and white, and understand there's going to be shades of gray that you can fit in your lifestyle too? And to not really get captivated so much by the people who are at the far end extremes of fitness, because that's going to be a really, really hard thing to attain. And they might have genetics for it. So I hope that guided you. I hope a lot of this whole podcast give you a few fundamental lessons. I highly recommend you go check out Johnny's stuff, as he came from the corporate world. And if you're in the corporate world, you can probably relate to a lot of his story. And I hope this whole podcast helps you move forward in any way it can. And remember to leave a review if you can, if you really enjoyed this episode, and share it with someone that you think that it might help. But most important, I'm always going to say this now: thank you. Thank you for listening. I appreciate every single listener I get taking time to appreciate my long form content that I am trying to help you with, to help you move forward towards your goals and your ambition, right? Because it's not about the pursuit of happiness, my friend. It's about the happiness within your pursuit. So keep pursuing, and I'll catch you next time.